Hello Varlets. Today we're reviewing one of my new favorite weapons, the Brute Brainer Mark III Latrine Shovel. It's sort of a hybrid weapon that sits between the cleavers and the bully clubs, but has some incredibly fun things that you can do with it. So, here are 5 things you need to know about the Brute Brainer Mark III Latrine Shovel. Number 1. Damage Profile. The Latrine Shovel has an interesting bunch of damage numbers that really solidifies itself as being an in-between weapon that is decent at everything, but doesn't stand out in any one particular area, at least on paper. The first 2 of its light attacks deal decent damage against your usual enemies, but are pretty weak against maniacs and do nothing against carapace. The third attack in the chain, however, changes things up in some unexpected ways. While the damage across armor classes is higher, it does almost double the damage against flak compared to its first 2 light attacks, and around 43% more damage against unarmored enemies. For its heavy attacks, its damage output is decent across the board, but they aren't especially strong against maniac, but do alright damage against carapace. As for weak spot and crit multipliers, the Latrine Shovel only gets around a 15% boost to either multiplier, not high enough to worry about building into. This weapon also deals decent body shot damage, which means it's a very forgiving weapon to mindlessly swing at enemies without having to aim for headshots. Number 2. Mega Punch. The Latrine Shovel shares the same weapon special as the cleavers. You dish out a solid punch to whatever's in front of you, ignoring their stagger reduction and staggering them. The difference, however, is the Latrine Shovel's punch is much stronger than the cleavers. While the cleavers have a little more momentum behind it that causes you to lunge forward a little, it only flinches enemies and causes them to stumble about. The Latrine Shovel's punch, on the other hand, turns you into Saitama from One Punch Man, knocking many enemy types onto the floor with almost the same level of stagger as if you bull rush them. This punch has an incredible amount of utility in outright disabling threats from combat. The punches from the shovel and cleavers are also capable of breaking a bulwark's guard, so don't be afraid to keep knocking on its shield till they break open. Number 3. Attack pattern and combos. Let's start with the heavy attacks. The Latrine Shovel's heavy attacks come in 2 patterns. The first heavy attack, H1, is an overhead downward strike. This will be the main attack you'll use to deal damage against tougher enemies, since it's very easy to land. The second heavy, H2, is a horizontal swing that deals a lot of stagger and hits many enemies. Chaining heavy attacks cycles through both attack patterns. For your light attacks, the Latrine Shovel also has 2 patterns. The first 2 attacks, L1 and L2, are horizontal swings. Meanwhile, the third attack, L3, is a diagonal downward swing, which, as we saw in the damage profile section, deals a lot more damage than the first 2 attacks. An interesting note here, the Latrine Shovel's light attack chain cycles between its L2 and L3 attacks after the first time you go through the whole chain. This is pretty important to note because it affects your attack breakpoints. For example, if you start attacking with L1 into L2 and 3, you would need to hit a scab shooter 3 times to take it out. But if you start your attack chain with L2 and L3, you only need 2 hits to kill it. The Latrine Shovel also has 3 notable attack combos. The first is the L1 and H2 sweep. This combo lets you smack crowds of adds around the place while gradually chipping away at their numbers. The Latrine Shovel functions very similarly to the Preacher's Iron Helm Thunderhammer in this regard. The second combo is the H1 overhead into the Mega Punch to reset the attack chain. This combo is the most useful and devastating combo of the weapon, especially when you start pairing blessings and feats together. This combo allows you to spam the overhead heavy while keeping your intended target staggered and open to getting smacked on. The final combo is using the Mega Punch into L3 attack. Whenever you use your Mega Punch, your next light attack is always the L3, a powerful single target attack. When built correctly, this allows you to one-shot scab shooters with ease or sets up an enemy for a good shovelin to the face. Subsequent attacks then cycle through L2 and L3 until you reset your attack chain. Number 4. The blunt weapon problem. The Latrine Shovel suffers from the same issues that plague the Thunderhammers. Although it can hit a bunch of adds and stagger them, the Latrine Shovel can only deal damage to 3 targets at a time. As you can expect, this makes horde management one of its natural weaknesses, as you'd be slapping adds around rather than mowing them down like you would with a Bull Butcher Cleaver, for example. Another problem I think the Latrine Shovel suffers from is something that the Rashad Combat Axe used to suffer from. Certain attacks that clearly hit an enemy in the head are coded to prioritize body shots instead. This is particularly apparent for all its light attacks, and you'll find yourself struggling to get hit shots registered. While not the biggest problem for the Latrine Shovel, it does make some blessings more difficult to activate, which could make a world of difference. If the Latrine Shovel were to ever receive a buff or a fix, it would be in this particular area to make the weapon a little smoother and efficient to use. Number 5. Build recommendations. The Latrine Shovel has surprised me because of how well it works with some of the blessings it has available to it and how they pair well with the Ogyrn's feats. Looking at the blessing table of the Latrine Shovel, we have a rather small pool of blessings to pick from. But what is good about it is that most of these blessings are actually viable and useful on the Latrine shovel, depending on the build you want to go for. Now, having tested numerous different builds on very many different Latrine shovels, I have concluded that there is one core build that can be adapted into different versions, depending on what you like the weapon to do for you. So, for this part, I'll go over the core pieces of the build before talking about the various ways you can customize the weapon to your liking. After everything we've learned about the Latrine shovel in the sections before, I have come to the conclusion that the perfect anchor blessing that practically fits most builds is Skull Crusher. Skull Crusher states that targets receive up to 20% damage upon getting staggered, lasts for 5 seconds. Because the Latrine shovel innately has strong stagger on all of its attacks and combos, which includes the Mega Punch, Skull Crusher works as free damage on even the toughest of enemies like Maulers, Ragers, Reapers, and even Crushers. Simply opening with a punch to the face on most enemies not only dazes them or sends them flying, but it means for the next 5 seconds, they'll be taking 20% more damage from your follow-up attacks and combos. This can help reach crucial breakpoints for some key enemies without having to invest in perks. Speaking of perks, I think as part of the core build there is one perk that, in my opinion, is necessary. Plus infested damage. That's right. I know what some of you must be thinking and you must be very puzzled about this suggestion, but hear me out. With Skull Crusher alone, you can technically just about reach the 2-shot breakpoint to kill a Poxwalker. Adding plus infested damage might not help you any further with taking out one Poxwalker, but it helps a lot when you're dealing with very many of them. Since your attack patterns swing left to right when it comes to fighting a group of Poxwalkers or even a horde, you're unlikely to smack the same target twice with the initial swing. In all likelihood, you hit one Poxwalker with the first target damage in one swing, and deal first target damage to a different one as your swing returns. Because of this, the actual breakpoint matters less. Instead, what matters now is how many swings is it going to take to clear the Poxwalker problem in front of you. The combination of Skull Crusher and plus infested damage helps you minimize the number of attacks you'll need, as even Poxwalkers that you don't deal actual damage to will still be primed to take plus 20% damage from Skull Crusher as well, since they will be staggered by your attacks. With this blessing and perk pairing, we have arrived at our core build, the everyday shovelin build. With this combination, the Latrine shovel is capable of dealing with ambient Poxwalkers with ease and hordes decently, while still being alright at taking on other enemies. From here on, we can decide what we'd like our Latrine shovel to specialize into. For this, there are 2 routes. Either make it an Elite Slayer, or further improve its effectiveness at trash clearing. For the Elite Slayer route, we will want to have thrust to let us bring the pain with our overhead heavy attacks. Pairing this blessing with the feat Knock 'em down, beat 'em up gives us a tremendous boost to our damage against single targets that pairs nicely with the Mega Punch and the Latrine shovel in general. Opening up with a Mega Punch helps activate Skull Crusher, while also getting a few stacks of Knock 'em down. Following this with a fully thrusted up overhead heavy is more likely than not going to leave an elite within an inch of its life, if not outright one-shot it. If you pair this combo with a heavyweight feat that gives you 50% more damage against Ogryn enemies, you can 2-shot a Crusher on Damnation without needing plus Carapace damage. As for perks, plus Maniac damage actually helps you out the most, since the Mega Punch into overhead heavy can one-shot most Flak elites already. Adding plus Maniac damage helps you better deal with mutants and Drake Ragers, the 2 targets the Latrine shovel does have a little trouble dealing with. Plus Unyielding damage can also be useful, as it helps you reach the 2-shot breakpoint for Reapers with the heavyweight feat. This also makes you very strong against Plague Ogryns as well. If you want to have the meme potential of one-shotting a Damnation level Crusher, you can opt to take plus Carapace damage. You'll also need Thrust 4 and max stacks of Knock 'em down to reach the breakpoint however. Otherwise, plus Carapace damage just gives you more leeway to deal with Crushers without having to get fully thrusted up heavies. For the trash clearing route, we have some options to work with. I personally find having more sustain to battle through adds is helpful in keeping me in the fight for longer. As such, Confident Strike makes an excellent pairing with Skull Crusher as you smack the heresy out of your targets with the light attack cycle. An alternative blessing would be Brutal Momentum to help you exert more control against bigger groups and hordes. However, because of how the light attack treats hit shots, activating Brutal Momentum can be a bit of a struggle. The best way to reliably activate it is to weave in your heavy attacks along with your light attacks, since the Latrine shovel's heavy attacks don't seem to suffer from the headshot priority issue. That being said, until the weapon's hitbox priority is improved, I find Brutal Momentum lacking when it comes to offering consistent value. The last blessing we can toy with is Thunderous. This blessing allows you to remove some of the enemy's damage resistance by stripping away their armor, to the benefit of you and the team. The armor reduction makes even Crushers vulnerable to your light attacks with heavy weight, and can actually help in dealing decent damage against them, though not nearly as potent as Thrust. Overall, this blessing is not great, but not terrible either, given your other options. As for perks for the trash clearing route, I find plus unarmored damage beneficial in a couple of ways. Having unarmored damage allows you to reach the one-shot light 3 breakpoint on Groaners, which are the less infected poxwalkers, and also helps you reach the 2-shot light attack cycle on Drake shooters. That being said, you can also choose to take plus maniac damage to improve your effectiveness against specials and Drake rages, something the Latrine shovel will struggle against without thrust, or if you don't have a ranged weapon to compensate for in this area. Plus flag damage is also acceptable, but benefits mostly for dealing with elites since the core build of the Latrine shovel can already 2-shot scab shooters and stalkers. Personally, between the two routes, I like the Elite Slayer one the best because it can still handle adds decently while living up to its name and absolutely dumping on elites with no problem. I don't see the Latrine shovel at all in my games, and why would I when the Bull Butcher is so far beyond the most capable weapon in the Ogyrn's melee arsenal. But then, I'm a player that likes to deviate away from the meta and build up weapons that don't get a lot of attention and playtime. I hope this weapon review has at least convinced you to try it out, or keep an eye out for a good one if it happens to come your way. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Varlets.